Hello there, many thanks for staying with us and welcome to another edition of Channels Beam. I'm Victor Matthias. Now, with the information and communications technology sector said to have so far this year contributed 18.44% in 2022, the president had no choice and he had to pass the Nigerian startup bill after it was also passed by both chambers of the National Assembly. Now, the bill seeks to further create an enabling environment for tech-based startups in Nigeria. The law is also said to hold huge benefits for the Nigerian economy and also adopt an approach to allow startups identify business challenges and then voice them out so that it can be addressed. So today on the program, we'll take a deep dive into the law or the act now to see how it will achieve its aims as well as its objectives. And joining us today on the program, we have with us right here in the Lagos studio, Timi Olagunju. He is a tech lawyer and a policy consultant. He is to my far right, as well as Emmanuel Paul. He is the managing director or managing editor at TechPoint Africa. It's a pleasure to have you both on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Indeed. So let me begin with how excited you are. But before we get into that excitement, let's get to listen to the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy. That's Issa Pantami. He briefs journalists after the bill was signed into law by President Muhammadu Buhari. All right, we'll still get to bring that video in just a bit, but let me first of all get your excitement as to this bill.
Okay, I wouldn't say I'm excited because it's not like everything, all the benefits that are supposed to be in the startup bill will be handed to startups on a silver platter. It's a call for more work on the startup part because if I'm sure my boss here, Timi, will actually show more light on this, but an issue with laws like this has always been implementation. So how do we make sure that the average young guy on the street that has an idea and wants to build a business using technology, he wants to build the next space stack, he wants to build the next flutter wave, how do we make sure he gets the benefits of this bill? That's so much of an issue. So you actually have to, it's a call for work. How do we implement the startup bill? The Startup Act 2022. How do we make sure that everyone that should benefit from it actually benefits from it? So that's the main thing. So it's more work, not so much excitement.
All right. Do you share his view?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you think it's more work for who now? The startup or the entrepreneurs, the government, the private sector? Who should be putting in more of the work? I
think it's more work for the ecosystem, but much more work for the government side of the ecosystem. Because many parts of the bill, of the act itself, when you look at, before the act was signed as a bill, Section 24 to 32 spells out some incentives, tech hub support, free trade zone arrangements, loans. So you would need institutions like the Bank of Industry, the CBN, and key agencies of government to put that into work. So I agree with him perfectly. It's more work.
Yeah. All right. So before we get into more of what the act says, let's get to listen to the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Issa Pantami, who again briefed journalists just right after the president signed the bill.
Mr. President has assented to the bill and also conveyed to the relevant institutions of government for gazetting. And the approach we adopted was to allow our young startups, our young innovators all over the country to identify the challenges they were being confronted with when it comes to intellectual property, financing, regulation, incentive, among many others. The minimum at the start, based on the provision of the law, is 10 billion naira. There is going to be a presidential council which has been entitled as National Digital Innovation and Entrepreneurship Council. Digital innovation and digital entrepreneurship are the two prerequisites to digital economy. So there is going to be a council, and this council is going to be chaired by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And the vice chair is going to be the Vice President of Nigeria. In some states, because if you are going around with a computer, you will be detained. And some people will allege you are a Yahoo boy. This is a problem. With this council, when president directs, nobody will say no, they must comply. I hope you understand. So the challenge, issue of funding is not even the major issue they complain about. The major issue, let that enabling environment be provided. Let them be honored and be recognized instead of being harassed because of their ideas.
Well, let me pick it up from that line, that last line. He talked, instead of being harassed, they would, entrepreneurs would prefer to be honored, which rightfully, has been done, during the last awards, and we saw the CEO of Paystack, or the co-founder of Paystack, being honored with that award. So perhaps you have more of people like that on the streets carrying laptops, but the enabling environment again isn't there. But let's talk about some of the things that the minister talked about that is contained in the bill. Now he's talking about a secretariat, and he's talking about a council to be chaired by the president. He's talking about 10 billion naira, a fund that will be available to startups, yes, or to entrepreneurs, so they can channel or key into that. And so Emmanuel made mention of one thing, he said implementation might be one of the key issues. Why do you think that would be? And, to what extent do you think implementation of other bills or other acts, that concern the tech ecosystem has been in the past?
Yes. Okay, for me? Or,
yeah, you
okay.
can go ahead.
So basically, when it comes to that council, that the minister talked about in Section 3, you realize the fact that, yes, it will have an oversight over MDAs, that's ministries, departments, and agencies, that produce policies that affect the tech ecosystem. And so, for example, you have the CBN ban on cryptocurrency. It somewhat affects the ecosystem. So that kind of council would have an overarching power to perform some oversight, some streamlining of policy making. So it's quite commendable. My concern with it is that it is constituted largely by more of the government side. I think we have 8 MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies of government, and 4 thereabout, non-government entities. And when you talk about, policy making, you see that policymakers, that's the MDAs, usually have an agenda, right? It could be political, it could be revenue generation, but that agenda can be properly balanced, right, with an equal or close to equal representation from the non-government side, as it were, because we're talking of digital innovation and entrepreneurship. Yeah. Not just public service innovation, so in that sense, I think, and then the media also, that there's a section that talks about an advisory council, right, and which is an important part of the whole framework. So you have the council, the Digital Innovation Entrepreneurship Council, right, and then you have an advisory council made up of, private sector, key players, institutions like Computer Society of Nigeria, startup community, and the likes. Yeah. And one thing that does is that it helps to ensure that, some of the, policies or oversight function of the overall council is done in a way that it incorporates everyone collaboratively in that sense. So I think that's the commendation there. As it were,
on one part. So earlier you talked about not being so excited and talking about more work to be done. Timmy says the ecosystem has to do more work. But in terms of, the government now, they've created this. They've seen the push. They've pushed for this bill, and it is where it is now. What more do you think can be done?
A lot more can be done, right? So first things first, the fact that Nigeria needed a startup bill in the first place is something that should make us exercise a little bit of caution, because if you look at the trend of companies or countries that have implemented startup acts, they're usually small. So let's say there's a Tunisia right beside an Egypt that's a major economic powerhouse. So Tunisia creates a startup act to try and attract investors and make that place an enabling environment for startups because of that economic powerhouse that is Egypt. So, but Nigeria, it's more like startups are using this as a way to find protection from regulations that do not favor them. Timmy mentioned this, the crypto ban by the CBN. In Lagos, there was the Okada ban in 2020. There have been one or two regulations like that that have just been really, really weird, right? So on the part of the government, I think one thing that should happen is, okay, there's a lot of MDAs and ministries in this council. They should talk more to each other so that one person is not doing one thing, then the other person is doing another thing. So there should be more collaborative approach when regulating startups. So Alcon should not be coming up with a regulation while NIDA is coming up with something else. One is positive, the other is negative. So there should be more collaboration on government level.
So is it like a case of, giving with the right hand and taking with the left hand?
Yeah, something like that. So we need to see more of, yes, that's pretty much the best way to sums it up, right? So on part of the government, when the ecosystem guys are coming to meet you and say, oh, let's talk about this, we should give them a listening ear. So you might see people that are really, really young, younger than me, way younger than me, and they're pulling in millions of dollars in revenue for the startup. So you mentioned the awards that were given to the likes of Paystack and all of them. But those same guys, their startup, their employees will be found in the streets and be getting held up by members of the police force, right? So there's so many things. Many agencies need to understand this, not just the major ones on the federal level. Then another good point I think we should point out is at the state level, each state should actually domesticate the Startup Act. It's very, very important. We've seen it with the telcos, the right-of-way issues. There's a federal right-of-way amount, but the states have their own. So it's important that states are also carried along in this process. Lagos has actually mentioned that they're planning to domesticate this act. So we need more states to actually follow suit. Yeah.
All right, very well. Let me take this conversation to Abuja, where we have Jude Feromi standing by. He is the practice lead at Co-Creation Hub. Jude, it's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, Victor. It's a pleasure to have you.
Indeed. Well, I know you were part of, you were one of the players in the tech ecosystem that, were part and parcel of this bill, when it was a bill, till now that it is an act. So one key thing that has just been raised is the fact that, states need to domesticate the act. Was there any plan along the line, when all of the conversations were going on? Was there any conversation with state executives in terms of, domesticating this act?
Absolutely. And I think the best place to start is to remind Nigerians of the approach in co-creating this bill. When the effort started, we call it the big tent approach. So you can imagine that the engagement team already has a plan and a strategy for reaching out to states to domesticate this bill. It's called state adoption. And there's a team of, again, young entrepreneurs, tech ecosystem leaders who are driving these efforts at the state level. And that's why you see that Lagos has already mentioned it. In Edo State, there's conversation going on around that. And the next step now for tech entrepreneurs is to say, this is the state where I am, where my team or my company is operating. How can we drive the efforts to domesticate the bill, the act now, as a bill in our own state? But beyond that, one of the things that I think is important to mention is, Victor, I don't know if you remember, 5 years ago, you came to an event that my team was organizing, founding networks at the time. And the conversation and the report that you gave after that, in the conversations that we had during the event, was the lack and the dearth of legislation and policy in Nigeria when it comes to startups. You see the United States of America, and I remember saying exactly this 5 years ago, right? Stevenson White-Law Act was far back 1986. The Badoyle Act that talks about competitive innovation in America was like some 30 years ago, right? And now, as we're speaking, there is another Compete Act. And anybody or any tech entrepreneur in Nigeria can feel free to go and look at that. There's another Compete Act that is currently being discussed both in the Senate and the Congress of the United States of America. And that's why you see that these countries they're like way ahead of us. So I'm excited that this bill has come. And like the managing editor from Tech Cabal already mentioned, it's important that we take this as the foundation to build up on the other legislations and policies that can happen at the state level. And you know, one thing that's important, another thing that's important is the need for collaboration and engagement, because that's how we got here. So something is happening that we don't want or that we don't like to see. This bill, this Nigerian Startup Act rather, is now an act. This Nigerian Startup Act provides the platform for us at the federal level to be able to bring these issues forward and then collaborate or engage with government and collaborate with the MDAs that we've already started that journey with, right, to be able to solve those problems. So you see a lot of all the issues with MDAs saying one person is doing this, the other person is doing that. The council, as provided by the Act, will now bring everything together when it comes to startups and regulating startups in Nigeria. And that's a good thing. I think it's the beginning of a lot of good things to come that we need to already start to build on as tech ecosystem.
All right, let me just hold you there for a bit. You know, it's good you mentioned 5 years ago. Like, if memory serves me right, that event was in the Keja. But I'll look into it quite quickly and I'll come back to you on that. But let me just hold you there for a bit, as well as our panelists right here in the studio. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back in a moment. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We still have with us our panelists right here in the Lagos studio as well as from our Abuja studio. And just before we went on break, Jude Farami was talking about quite some things, quite about reasons why Nigerians should be excited about this bill. Jude, before you joined the program, one of the issues that was raised was the fact that in the country we build or we have this ability to write sweet and perfect documents, But one of the issues is implementation. So why would this be a difference?
So the reason why I believe this is going to be a difference is that the approach that we've taken from the get-go, I hope and I pray that that's the same approach that we continue with it. I led the engagement team of the night, which is made up of volunteers, by the way, right, to engage the MDAs here in Abuja on the startup bill. And I've been doing a couple of these validation sessions on bills and legislation for a while, and that's the highest, in fact, it's the most engaged MDA validation session that we've ever had. All the MDAs were there, the FIRS, CBN, SCC, a number of them. And now that we have an act, it is something that they hone, right? So in implementing this, it is not a top-bottom approach to say, this is what this MDA has to do or what this MDA has to do. This is what we've agreed makes sense to support startups and bring in that kind of prosperity that we want in Nigeria when it comes to technology ecosystem. If we continue with that approach, which I hope we do, and then domesticate these at the state level, using the same approach as well, right? Then we can be sure that implementation is going to come alive in the way that we expect it. And that's why I agree with the TechPoint managing editor, who said that we still have a lot of work to do. But we must not approach that conversation from, we've not already done so much. We're coming from ground zero. And this effort, I believe, is one of the things that we should be celebrating today in Nigeria. And then using that same spirit of, yes, this is victory, we've gotten here. How do we then use the same spirit of collaboration, engagement, co-creation to implement this bill, domesticate it at the state level, and then begin to see all the wonders that would come from it. And this is what I can promise. If we do all of this, you can be sure that this startup act is only the foundation for what is to come. Because then we'll realize that there is even much, much further legislation that we can put in and make things better. And before you know it, Nigeria is already like the top destination for tech investment in Africa. But we can definitely do much more than we're currently doing right now. And that's what I expect to see.
Well, I believe a lot of enthusiasts also hope to see that. But let me hold you there for a bit and come back to Lagos, where I have Timmy and Emmanuel. You know, so I mean, he's gone a long way. You know, trying to douse whatever tension that might be. You know, in the space as regards implementation. You know, and how some of these things are going to operate. So, but one other thing that has also come up, is the fact that people are looking at the composition of this council now, and the secretariat. I mean, it's supposed to be domiciled in NITDA, which some people believe already has a lot of, functions to so, I don't know what your view is on that. Do you think it should be independent, or do you think it should still be under NITDA, which is, the agency that pretty much governs or oversees how information and technology development, runs in the country?
So, frankly speaking, right, if there's going to be any success with the implementation of the incentives, because the essence of the bill is not just to be labeled a startup. The essence of the bill should be that those who are labeled startup get the benefits of being labeled startup. The benefits contained when it was a bill in section 24 to section 32 of that bill, and an act now. And so in that sense, right, the point is that it requires enormous, gargantuan work. And NITDA already has a lot on its plate. And so the argument is that will NITDA be able to extend its work capacity towards not just doing what it's doing. NITDA is working on something on AI regulation now. The tech ICT ecosystem that NITDA, administers is a vast portfolio, right? That's why we had a data board, a data bureau that was recommended outside NITDA because it was becoming, and so in this kind of regard, right, you see that for implementation to happen, that is for loans, advocacy would have to happen. And it has to come from that administrative secretariat. Will NITDA be able to do the advocacy work, policy advocacy, work, collaboration work that is required to identify the MDAs that need to ensure that they implement some of the incentives in that act? Incentives like loan incentives. We're talking of the CBN itself. We're talking of Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture, because we have startups who are in the agri space. So that vast majority of agencies. And then you also look at in terms of even hub, how will they be able to get the benefits of, free trade zones, that is stated in the act in terms of hub support. How would they be able to get the benefits of those hub support? That leadership has to come from that secretariat. And so if implementation, please take note of this point, if implementation is going to either fail or succeed, the buck stop at NITDA's table, because that's the administrative headquarters.
All right. So lastly, Emmanuel, sometimes when you have bills and they become acts, sometimes when it's an act, some of the things that were in the bill, either removed or maybe more things are added. Have you placed your finger on the act yet?
Okay, no, I haven't. I've communicated with the NSB team, and I've only been given the opportunity to ask specific questions on the components of the bill or the previous bill, which is now the act. So, but I haven't been able to lay my finger on the
act itself. Well, so hopefully when it does come out, would look at that and see just to a comparison of things in between the acts as well as the bill, to see how things are going. But I have to say thank you to both of you for joining us today on the show.
Thank you.
Of course, as well as Jude, who is joining us from Abuja City. Jude, as well, thanks to you for joining us today on the show. Hopefully what's in the act is what was in the bill. But let's just wait for when it eventually comes out. But again, I would just like to close the show by saying that now that the bill is now an act, let the tech ecosystem blossom. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Victor Matthias. Would leave you with the most videos on our YouTube channel in the past week. Bye for now.
The discovery of an illegal pipeline used for crude oil theft in the Niger Delta kicks this week's most viewed videos.
If you look at the whole setting, where this illegal bunkering is taking place, if you have one Navy gunboat, one Army gunboat. The extreme end is where the real bunkering is taking place.
It is followed in fourth place by the devastating floods in the country, where it has washed up dead bodies in the Bayelsa cemetery.
I saw some things flowing out, coming out when the water is coming. Immediately I saw it, that first one was casket with its common side. Then the second one that we bury without casket.
Third spot sees Kaduna Governor Nasir El-Rufai accusing presidential candidate of the Labour Party of police brutality when he visited Anambra in 2013.
In 2013, I went to Anambra State as an official of the APC to witness the by-election for governorship. Your next guest, Peter Obi, was governor. He got me arrested and detained for 48 hours in my hotel room.
Second place sees presidential candidate of the APC, Bola Tinubu, asking Ekiti residents to deliver at least 95% of their votes to him.
You don't know them. The only person you know is Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And you must deliver 95% of the votes.
While first spot is taken by the discovery of another illegal crude oil theft pipeline, which has been operating for 9 years.